we don't talk about it as much. And why do I feel awkward, Angela? Tell me.
Well, you're certainly not alone. And the word should, I ban the word should. You shouldn't feel anything because you feel what you feel. You've never been made to feel like this is a normal conversation to have. So it's perfectly okay. But what it isn't okay is to ignore it and pretend that we can just put it in a box and that it doesn't affect you, because just because it only happens to women, it's affecting everybody.
What are the kind of impacts that it can have on you as a professional?
So in perimenopause especially, one of the things that comes up a lot, but women don't want to talk about and don't like admitting, is that they're struggling mentally. And I do just want to put out, not everybody does. So 25% of women, they'll be going through their perimenopause, they might not experience any symptoms. So, and everyone will experience it in their own way, and some more severe than others. But a lot of those early signs can be psychological, which we're not prepared for in any way.
This episode is brought to you by Instant Impact. Instant Impact provides transformative talent solutions to small and mid-sized companies that are making between 30 and 500 hires each year. If your recruitment's giving you a headache and you don't know where to start, then give the team at Instant Impact a call or visit www.instant-impact.com for more information. Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About HR. I'm your host, Felix Mitchell. Today we're tackling a topic that affects almost half the workforce, causing anxiety, crushed confidence, and an ever-widening gender pay gap. If it were anything else, this would be talked about in boardrooms across the country, and yet it's still consigned to the shadows, somehow a taboo subject. Yes, we're talking about the menopause and perimenopause. My guest today is Angela Wilkins-Green, the founder of Green Path Coaching. And Angela specializes in supporting female leaders to navigate this phase in their lives, to rediscover their strength and step into what could be, what should be, the most empowering phase in their careers. Angela, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So let's start, big topic. Why did you decide to focus on such an important subject matter for your business?
Purely because of my experience of going into perimenopause, and I had no idea what was happening. And I suddenly realised and I can talk about my experience and what that looked like, but I realised when I needed to change my career path that all I wanted to do was make sure that no other women felt as bad as I did for such a long period of time. And so it was always an obvious topic for me to want to be passionate about from that moment on.
Well, good to get a calling, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Maybe less good to have gone through such a challenging experience. I wonder if you just share, just so sort of listeners have context, what it was like for you going through perimenopause.
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things to say is I've never heard of the word perimenopause. So often when we talk about menopause, everybody hears the word menopause. When we talk about it, everyone uses this generic term menopause. But we are only in menopause for one day. When we're going through our menopause naturally, so assuming that we haven't had a hysterectomy, so surgically been put into menopause or chemically been put into menopause, in a natural transition, we're in menopause for one day. So why do we all talk about this word menopause? And I think what women generally associate with the word menopause is I'll be in my 50s, I might get some hot flushes, my periods will stop, and I won't be able to have any more children. And that is essentially all we know. We're never taught about it in school. So unless we've been lucky enough to have a mum or an auntie that might have told us about her experience, we know nothing. But actually the important stage is perimenopause. That's where all the fun happens, I'll call it. And it can happen much earlier than we expect. So perimenopause can start naturally any time from our late 30s. In fact, really, the age probably needs to come out of the conversation entirely. It's all about our hormones and our hormones changing rather than an age-specific thing. So for me in particular, my hormones started fluctuating at quite a young age, and I became aware of some symptoms at the age of 42. But because I didn't know about perimenopause and I didn't associate myself with the word menopause, I just ignored my symptoms for a very long time. And it was about 2 years before the realization started to kick in, and my symptoms were so bad that I crashed and ended up walking away from my 25-year career in fashion retail.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I'm not alone. There's a lot of women that this happens to.
No, I was just about to say that, because it definitely feels like an issue that touches on a lot of, I mean, obviously it's going to touch on almost all women and a huge proportion of the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why is it that we don't discuss it more? And why is it? And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know why. I do not know why. But when I was prepping for this interview and asking some of these questions, I feel like a weird sense of awkwardness. Mm-hmm. I know I shouldn't, right? My rational brain is like, get out of your own way, Felix. And I'm a bit of an awkward person anyway. But why is it we don't talk about it as much? And why do I feel awkward, Angela? Tell me.
Well, you're certainly not alone. And the word should, I ban the word should. You shouldn't feel anything because you feel what you feel. And that's perfectly okay. And eventually, hopefully, none of us will feel awkward when the word menopause or perimenopause comes up in conversation. That's one of the reasons I'm here doing this work, is that we all know it, we all understand it, and we all know it's just this natural thing that happens to every single woman in the world. So it should be okay to talk about it. But let's face it, we're never told about it at school. When we're at school and we have the conversation about puberty and periods, they split the boys and the girls up. I don't know if they still do that, but they did when I was at school. And so you're not learning about these things together. And so boys, you know what boys are like in their teenage years.
I do.
They're sort of taking the mickey and not really listening and not taking any of it in, and then we're not told about it. And so what you've never been made to feel like this is a normal conversation to have. So it's perfectly okay, but what it isn't okay is to ignore it and pretend that we can just put it in a box and that it doesn't affect you, because just because it only happens to women, it's affecting everybody, because every man knows a woman that is going through her perimenopause, probably knows or can see what happens to their mum or their grandma or their aunties. They might be seeing their wives or girlfriends going through it at the moment. We're all impacted, and you might not even have a partner. It might be a close work colleague that you're working with, that you can see something's changing, but you might not necessarily understand what it is that's happening.
All right, cool. Let's do it. Let's kick any kind of awkwardness out of the way and jump in head on.
Okay.
So, I think I guess we've spoken about very high level what's happening. It's a question of hormones changing at a certain phase in a woman's life. Mm-hmm. What happens in the workplace? What are the kind of impacts that it can have on you as a professional?
Well, I mean, when you think about all the different array of symptoms that a woman might be experiencing, it can be affecting her in a multitude of ways at work. So in perimenopause especially, one of the things that comes up a lot, but women don't want to talk about and don't like admitting, is that they're struggling mentally. So one of the things that comes up a lot is we struggle with brain fog. And I do just want to put out, not everybody does. So 25% of women, they'll be going through their perimenopause, they might not experience any symptoms. And this is why it can be a difficult subject, because even some women will say, well, I didn't experience
that. Didn't happen to me.
Yeah, exactly. So, and everyone will experience it in their own way, and some more severe than others. But a lot of those early signs can be psychological, which we're not prepared for in any way. So we can suffer with huge loss of confidence. We start to feel really nervous about things that we've never felt nervous about before. the brain fog really does impact so many women. And when that happens, and it might happen to me through this conversation, we're just in mid-flow and suddenly I just stop. I can't remember what I was saying, or the word that I'm looking for won't come. And when you're in a senior role, or you're leading a team and you're stood up in front of people presenting, when that happens, it's really embarrassing. And you don't want to admit that there's something wrong with you.
And then you're so focused on being embarrassed as well that you can't pick up where you left off, and it's sort of compounding.
The hot flush will come and it all does exacerbate. So, and I think especially if we work in a male-dominated environment, I think that's a really tough place to be. And then, of course, you've got the physical symptoms as well. Women are really struggling with heavy or irregular periods. They're always at risk. Am I going to flood? They're real problems that women are facing that we're not really being catered for in the workplace. So it all feels a bit hush-hush. We're embarrassed about it because no one's talking about it. We don't think there's any support in place, so we can't go to our managers to talk about it. Do I even want to talk to my male manager about it? So there's so much to consider in the mix.
And how long does can these symptoms go on for?
Well, for some women, it's 4 years. For some women, 10 to 14 years. And for some women, they will become post-menopausal. So once we've become menopausal for that one day, which means we've gone 12 months and 1 day with no period, we become post-menopausal for the rest of our lives. And some women will continue to experience symptoms for the rest of their lives. So some people do say, ask your mother, ask your aunt, ask your grandparents, what did they experience? Your experience might replicate what they did, but that's not the case for everybody. So it's always useful to speak to your family members and see what their experience was, but it's different for everybody.
So there'll be people listening, and then some will be going through their perimenopause, some will be postmenopausal, all different sorts of people. Let's think about those people who, maybe they're one of those male managers, and they're thinking, "Gosh, I didn't know about any of this. I must have some people on my team that are going through some of these really challenging issues and not bringing it up." What can they do? What can managers, all backgrounds, all demographics, what can they do to support their teams and to create an environment where this isn't so detrimental?
Yeah, and it is a really tricky one. And again, there is no right or wrong answer, because it really does depend on the culture in the organisation that you're in. How supportive is that culture as a whole? What is the makeup of your team? What is the age range of that team? The mix of male and females within your team is all got to be taken into consideration.
All right, well, give us the pub answer. You're having a drink with a friend and they're saying, "Oh, what can I do?"
Yeah. For me, I think the best thing that you can do is become as open to conversation as you can. So if you could do more to be open to talking openly with your team, sharing your experiences of your weekends or your ups and your downs, and sharing if you're having a tough time, that shows a willingness to be able to communicate in an empathetic way. Then you can be suggesting that your organisation, or if you can do it yourself, be putting in place things like training for managers or a lunch and learn for people to learn about menopause. Because if you start to slowly introduce the conversation, women will start to feel safer to open up.
And maybe a part of that is that, it's a word we keep coming back to, the sort of vulnerability and being transparent around your own limitations. I had, so I got two boys, two kids, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and the youngest was a bit of a terror when he was younger, and I basically just wasn't getting any sleep. And we were having an all-company meeting, which I slept through.
Did you?
Because I'd had a nap. My brain wasn't working. I was so sleep deprived that my brain wasn't working. Yeah. And I turned up 15 minutes late, and I just said to everyone, "I'm really sorry. I was so tired I had to have a nap, and I forgot to set an alarm. I'm 15 minutes late." I got 3 or 4 different messages from people saying, I'm so glad that you didn't pretend you were on a client call and you just shared you were having a tough time.
Absolutely.
And I thought about it. It's easy. I think it's easier when you're leading a business because you're not worried about any disciplinaries or anything like that. But I realized that just a really small piece of authenticity and vulnerability went quite a long way with.
Absolutely. It is absolutely the key, that authenticity. You know, I'm not a massive fan of the word itself.
It's too American.
It really is. but it is the core of what we actually need as humans, because we all relate to each other. And it doesn't matter if we're male or female, we've all got our struggles. You've got your struggles. And if you are able to come to work and say, actually, I'm just feeling a bit rubbish today, it's okay for a woman to come to work and go, I just feel a bit rubbish today. Not every woman needs or wants support from their organisation in a formal way. What they need is some empathy and some understanding that some days I might just not be on it as I might be on other days. Lack of sleep is a major issue for many women at this time. So.
Oh, really?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you've created that space to share. It sounds like a really stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a team member who comes to you and says, look, I've got brain fog. I'm really struggling to get my head around. Let's say it's someone senior, right? And you sort of, they're in a particular time in the business where you really need them on their A game, and they say, look, I just don't feel like I am on my A game. What can you do as a manager around what's the kind of support that you could, because that's hard, right?
It's so hard, so hard. But you're already winning because they felt like they were able to come and tell you that. And
Yeah.
that is such a major step in getting it right. So if you get someone that comes and has that conversation with you, pat yourself on the back because you're doing something right in the first place. And then don't try to fix anything. It would be my advice, because you're not there to fix their problems. What they need is some understanding and some space, and for you to just ask the question, what do you need? What can I do to help? What do you need from me right now? And depending on what they ask, you're not necessarily going to be able to give them everything that they need, but showing some willingness to make some adjustments or give them more time or whatever it is, showing some willingness to be on their side, some understanding that you get it. We're in a tough space right now. It's like everybody's working harder than ever, but actually you'll get far more out of that person if you ask them what they need. And it doesn't always have to be about spending money and budgets, and it might be some really simple stuff like, can I just come in 15-30 minutes later because I need to avoid this commute in the morning because it's absolutely draining me because it's so hot on the tube and I can't breathe. It could be as simple as something like that.
Yeah, and to your point, everyone's individual circumstances are different, and they're the best person to judge what kind of help, support.
Exactly. Yeah.
Otherwise.
I would say, don't jump in and just go, okay, these are the things I can do.
It's our perimenopause playbook. Don't worry.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Great advice. Let's flip the script a little bit then. What advice would you give to women who are experiencing some of these symptoms and are struggling at work?
I would say find your people. It might not be people at work. That's okay. You might not feel comfortable to have that conversation at work. But there are millions of women out there who will be able to resonate with what you are experiencing. Won't be exactly the same. That doesn't matter, but you need a space to feel heard. So listen to the podcasts, inform yourself, make sure you're visiting trustworthy websites where you can get really good information, speak to your GP about what your options are, join communities. You know, there are menopause cafes up and down the country. The main thing is just don't ignore it.
Yeah.
Would be my biggest piece of advice. Your body is telling you something for a reason, and it might not be perimenopause. It could be something else. But at this age, it's highly likely that it might be playing a part, and having that knowledge to go, what could this be? Know what questions to ask.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned GPs, because I know that the amount of knowledge that many GPs have is a bit of a bugbear of yours.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the GP level of understanding of menopause and perimenopause.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't want this to be about, GPs just don't get it, because it's getting much better. And I want to be really fair to them, They are general practitioners. They are not the experts of everything for everybody. They never can be. They never will be. But as women, we're often left at the bottom of the pile, and GPs aren't given really any training. In some cases, I think they're only getting like 30 minutes of training through all their 7 years on menopause. So you will find people like me who have gone and done some specialist menopause training and will know more about the transition and what you can do to help yourself than your GP will. But it is an improving picture. Lots of GPs are getting it, they're listening, they're putting in the work, they're getting the understanding, and lots of surgeries are now putting in place menopause specialists that you can go and see. So it's not all bad, but unfortunately I think at the moment in the UK it's a bit of a lottery as to where you live, as to what help you get. So my advice to women when they want to go and see the GP, especially if you don't want to or you can't afford to go and visit a private GP, is to go and make sure you're doing your research yourself. So you need to be able to go into your appointment and self-advocate. Ideally, you've done your research and you know exactly what you want to get from that appointment. Most GPs will be quite receptive to you if you go in very knowledgeable about your own symptoms and what your choices are. It does again depend on age a little bit. GPs will definitely, in most cases, make women take a blood test to test their hormone levels if they're under the age of 45. Many GPs are still making women in their early 50s have a blood test.
And that's not the right thing to do.
That is not the right thing to do, no. So ideally, it's all about your symptoms.
Right.
And if you can go in and demonstrate that you have significant symptoms and a number of them, really you shouldn't even need a blood test. It won't make any difference because our hormones are fluctuating. So you can go in one day, even 1 hour, and have a blood test and it'd be one result. And then you go in and it'll be sugar, something completely different. So women are being dismissed. I was doing a workshop just a few weeks ago, and a woman there, she was coming up for 52 years old and still being denied HRT.
And HRT, just for listeners, is hormone replacement therapy.
Yes.
And is one of...
It's one of your choices. It's the go-to for really just replacing your estrogen and your progesterone, and in many cases, for some women, their testosterone. Testosterone is a whole different conversation within the NHS care because it's not licensed for women in the UK. So many women are having to go private to get testosterone if they need it and want to try it. So it's a very difficult conversation. But many women can't take HRT from an array of reasons. Many women don't want to take hormone replacements, would choose to go through their menopause naturally, which is completely and utterly their choice. And there's lots you can do with lifestyle factors to improve your symptoms. And again, everybody's different. There is no right or wrong. There is no there are lots of benefits to taking hormone replacement therapy now. But if you choose not to, that is entirely up to you. But I would say everyone needs to do their own research and be informed and know what feels right for you.
And as always with doing research, have you got a couple of really good websites you can just recommend to listeners for them to inform themselves?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I would just say go and visit the British Menopause Society.
Ah,
yeah,
great. That's easy.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the go-to. Obviously, you can come and visit my website. That would be great.
greenpathcoaching.com.
Yeah, absolutely. But the British Menopause Society is where you're going to get safe information that you know you can trust. It's regulated information in the UK. So there is lots of misinformation going on out there. You need to be really careful on social media what you're listening to.
Ain't that always the
Yes.
ain't that always the truth?
Yes.
What's really been going through my head is this sort of the reason why this feels like such an important topic, just in a non-ethical way, but for businesses around the world, is presumably this is impacting women at the peak of their career.
Absolutely.
Right? And I would guess, although I'm not sure, I know your story, presumably it leads to really senior, really productive, really integrated, impressive members of the team losing confidence and leaving the workplace altogether.
Absolutely. It is happening time and time again. And this you're absolutely right. This is women at the top of their game. You know, I was in a director position and I just started to spiral. And I ended up, I got made redundant during COVID, and I didn't feel able to go back into that senior role. So I started consulting, and I just went on this journey of what else am I going to do, because I don't believe I can do that anymore. I don't think I've got it in me anymore. And all I needed actually was for my hormones to be balanced. And today, who knows? And I don't regret what's happened now, but I might still be in that career. I might. No,
but it's nuts. And you look at, I literally list any industry, but you look at law firms. Always, they're saying, how can we get more women to transition into partner roles?
How do we get more women in boardrooms?
Yeah, right. Yeah, businesses. How do we fill out our board with women? Hedge funds. How do we make sure that more of our money's managed by women? These
support them in their 30s.
Right.
That's what we need to be doing. Get the information and the support to women in their 30s and their early 40s, when they actually can choose to do something about it and help themselves, which is what women want. They don't want other people helping them. They want to be able to support themselves, but without the information, without the knowledge, and without knowing where to find the support, that can become impossible to do.
Well, I'm really glad that we took the time to talk about this today. Any final thoughts for the audience today from you? What can they go out and do today to start making a difference tomorrow?
I think one of the biggest things I would say is, please don't ignore the conversation. Just because you don't feel it yourself, you don't think it applies to you, it does. Everybody knows somebody that is going to be struggling with it, and at some point it will impact you, impact your business. So do research, put support in place, and help women stay in their careers. That's what I'm all about.
Well, so am I. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and for sharing what is just incredibly important information.
Thank you very much for having me.